9.
Economics trumps stupidity. Colonial solutions never work. The signature stamps of poor governance in the Caribbean is the official expression of a preference for advice from the colonial power as against that of local professionals. I can understand this reality, as such advice usually comes with money, but that makes it an enticement rather than advice.
What appalls me,
However, is the apparent inability of our officials to figure out how to protect their own economic self interest. This was demonstrated very early in the events following the workers' strike at the Castlebruce estate. Being totally paralyzed in coming up with a meaningful solution to the situation in Castlebruce, the government of the day acquiesced to a solution from the British government. In that solution, the British government loaned to the colonial government in Dominica 3 million EC dollars to purchase both the Castlebruce and the Melville Hall estates from the CDC. In this solution, the British CDC recuperated its capital investment in Dominica, repaid its loan to the British Treasury, and turned the burden of paying for the land in Dominica into a sovereign debt on the people of Dominica. The institutional structure of CDC was removed from the surface of Dominica's agriculture. But I must hasten to add that its last general manager, Mr. Allen Pugh, stuck around, buying himself a small farm and continuing to enjoy living on the island. The second part of this solution was a grant from the British government to set up a land management authority to administer these estates. The British are very good at writing functionless laws. Along with this grant, they provided the government of Dominica with the legal instrument in the form of the Land Management Authority Act of 1973. This new act was obviously written by someone with very little knowledge of the established institutions already supporting agriculture in the country. Clause 3 states, "The authority shall have the power to hold land and other property of whatever kind, real or personal, and in particular for the purpose of fostering agricultural development in Dominica." Were a stranger reading this law for the first time, you would not be blamed for coming to the conclusion that, after this law, Dominica no longer needed an agricultural bank nor an agricultural ministry. The Land Management Authority had all the powers to plan, finance, train, and administer land for agriculture in Dominica.
under the Act,
The objectives of the Land Management Authority include such obligations as to develop proper land use in Dominica in state-owned and privately owned lands, to borrow funds and make loans to farmers, to administer the finances related to the creation and management of farms and the improvement of farm infrastructure, to provide training for farmers, to purchase land for the creation of economic farm units, to assist in promoting the development of agriculture in the state, and to assist in the marketing of farm produce. You simply had to compare this list of objectives with that as expressed in the cooperative's chance for change to differentiate the functional from the hyperbole. While this law was aimed at developing another state institution, the Castlebruce document was focused on developing a people in struggle. The test of competency would soon come when the Castlebruce Cooperative applied to the Land Management Authority in 1974 to lease part of the estate land. I was impressed by the workers when they showed me the proposed map of the land they wished to lease. It was 150 acres with a winding boundary line. Why is the line going all over the place? Well, in this area, the slope is too steep for us to farm, whereas over here, it is flat land with a small stream running through the area. They knew their physical space. I may have been impressed, but the general manager of the Land Management Authority, Mr. Stanley Pringle, was not. He was actually the chief agricultural officer at that time. I don't know if he was excited with his new assignment. One thing was sure, he was totally clueless about the detailed topography of Casa Bruce and received very little assistance from his Land and Surveys division. When Mr. Pringle was presented with the map by the workers from Casa Bruce, he immediately aborted the meeting. Better to abort than to look stupid in front of illiterate farmers. He later accepted the proposed boundary line, but imposed an annual rental of EC $7,330 per annum. In an interview with Mr. M. White for that survey, the workers clearly expressed their displeasure at the cost of the lease. Quoting page 58. Opposition to this rental is unanimous, and the feeling of members on the question of payment of rental runs very high. The argument put forward by the cooperative is that the government negotiated the purchase of the land from the former owners, and the government expects to recover from whom they had leased the land or part of it, the funds for the repayment of their debt. They argue that under the Land Management Authority, much of the land remains idle, and that the small part under productive use by the cooperative is expected to generate sufficient revenue to pay for the entire estate. Never underestimate the understanding of poor people about their predicament. The rent was subsequently reduced to $5,538 EC dollars per annum. My welcome mat disappears. A second incident occurred in 1975, which reflected on my work with the cooperative. According to responses given to Mr. White's survey, no members of the cooperative had expressed any interest in individual ownership of any part of the estate, either freehold or leasehold. All of the members were fully committed to the cooperative as designed. There were some members, however, who had shown an interest in and had requested permission to work their own gardens after the allotted time for working on the cooperative, that is, after 1 p.m. One of the crops grown under this arrangement was passion fruit, and even though they farmed it individually, they decided to unify their approach to sell their fruit to the fruit processing company owned by Mr. Cecil Bellot. Discussions went on for most of the evening prior to that meeting as to what would be the most appropriate price to offer. After a while, I intervened in this preparatory session and suggested that I would devise an instrument to assist them in the negotiations next day. What I did was to find the highest cost producer among them and worked out a price quantity model under which that person would always be able to maximize his net income. Presented them with this formatted spreadsheet printed on one page and instructed them as follows. If Mr. Bellot offers to buy X volumes per week, you simply locate that volume on the spreadsheet, trace it over to the price axis, and there you will find the price at which you can safely offer him that volume. I was present at this negotiation, sitting in the rear of the conference room at the processing plant's office in Roseau. Mr. Bellot offered them one price, and they discreetly consulted their spreadsheet, accepting that price, provided that he would guarantee to buy Y volumes. Mr. Bellot did his usual counter with something to the effect that he didn't need that much and expressed a new willingness to buy a lower volume. Once again, The farmers consulted their matrix guide and accepted to supply that lower volume but at a new specified price. Unfortunately, the negotiations did not go as I had hoped. I had suggested that one worker should keep the matrix guide at the back of the group and just provide the spokesman with the appropriate response. However, these guys were so enamored with their new instrument that they all turned around, poring over the piece of paper before coming up with their response. Mr. Bellot, for his part, could not understand what they were consulting and kept asking his assistant, who had an even more complex look of cluelessness. Realizing that he was losing control of the session, Mr. Bellot aborted the meeting and asked us all to leave his premises. The consequences for me got a little sticky. A rumor, conspiracy theory, started to circulate of an undesirable and communist-inspired development taking place in the Castlebus Cooperative. The next day, I was summoned to the police station and asked to leave the country ASAP. Apparently, Mr. Bellot may have reported to his political associates that the farmers had come armed with information provided to them by a communist in their midst. I arrived at the police station early next morning to be met by a Superintendent Hector. Hector at first seemed surprised at my physical appearance, rather on the small side. Maybe he was expecting a big guerrilla soldier with a beard. He took my passport and then made a beeline for one of the offices behind him. It was quite strange because he hesitated as he approached two open office doors behind him. He appeared unsure which one to enter. Finally, he chose the office to his right. It appears that a junior officer at the station saw Hector enter his office and immediately ran to that office, maybe thinking he was looking for him. Within seconds, Superintendent Hector reappeared and came to me with the announcement that, upon consultation with his superiors, I was to be advised that my permission to stay had been cancelled and that I should leave the island immediately. This was not the first attempt to expel me from Dominica, but it wouldn't be the last time I was made unofficially persona non grata in Dominica. After time, I would return with more economic models for the cooperative. In this case, as in others, I complied because this was not about me. If anything extraordinary was happening, it was not on my account. In a discussion with Athimate, he also reminded me of the other communist rumors rampant at that time. There were conversations that suggested that Fidel Castro had visited Castle Bruce by helicopter that evening to advise the cooperative leaders. In fact, soldiers of the Dominican Regiment soon became regular visitors to the farm, all decked out in their camouflage fatigue with rifles. The workers would find them in different parts of the farm when they went out to work early in the morning. Usually, upon arrival at their spot, the workers would set up a small fire and start roasting their breadfruit before the beginning of their daily chores. Soldiers began appearing as soon as they would detect the smell of roasted breadfruit. It soon became a country-style breakfast cafe for the troops on the lookout for Castro in the hills.